SpaceX had been on track to begin Starship Flight 12 ground testing, with both the next Super Heavy booster and Starship upper stage moving steadily toward a critical pre-launch verification campaign. But that flow was disrupted this week after a major anomaly at Massey's, an event that now raises new engineering questions and could push Flight 12 further out. Over the past several weeks, SpaceX had been preparing Flight 12 hardware, Booster 19 and Ship 39, for cryogenic proof testing. The booster cryo test stand, repaired and upgraded after the Booster 18 anomaly in November, was moved back to the production site to transport the fully stacked Booster 19 to Massey's for its proof tests. Meanwhile, Ship 39 inside Megabay 2 received its aft flaps and was also being readied for its own cryo-proof campaign. In parallel with preparing real flight vehicles, SpaceX had been running structural qualification tests at Massey's using multiple test articles, with the results feeding directly into Block 3 design updates for flight hardware. One of those test articles, Test Tank 19, has now failed, causing major concerns. Test Tank 19 represented the forward section of a Super Heavy booster and included Block 3 structural upgrades. Most importantly, the new integrated hot stage ring. It had already completed 8 stress tests last year, after which SpaceX implemented additional structural changes, likely adjusting stiffness and reinforcement based on strain data. After those upgrades, SpaceX stacked a 2-ring Starship aft tank section on top of the booster test article, with the integrated hot stage ring between them, essentially recreating the booster-to-ship interface for structural testing. Teams then installed the can crusher cap and ran tension rods from the cap down to the base of the test stand to apply heavy axial compression through the test tank assembly. This setup simulates the intense compressive and bending loads the hot stage ring experiences in flight, as the ship's weight pushes downward while booster thrust pushes upward, squeezing the structure between them. The first stress test was conducted on January 16th, and the assembly passed cleanly. For round 2, SpaceX increased the loads by adding more tension rods, raising total compression and tightening load control across the stack. Round 2 took place Tuesday evening. The assembly was cryo-filled in about 20 minutes, held for roughly 10 minutes for data collection, and everything initially appeared nominal. But during detanking, the structure failed at the common dome interface region, producing visible damage and venting nitrogen gas. The stack stayed upright, pointing to a localized structural failure rather than a full collapse. 2 explanations are possible. SpaceX may have intentionally pushed the structure to ultimate load to determine the failure limit, or the failure may have occurred unexpectedly during a test intended to stay within safe margins. SpaceX has intentionally pushed test tanks to failure in the past to map out structural limits, so that kind of testing isn't unheard of. But a deliberate test to failure on only the second run of a new configuration is still highly unlikely. If this were planned, SpaceX would usually ramp loads gradually over multiple tests and heavily instrument the expected failure point. And since this campaign was meant to validate the integrated hot stage ring, a planned test to failure would typically be designed so the hot stage region reaches its limit first, or at least shows the first signs of distress. Instead, the failure occurred around the booster common dome, which suggests the load path found an unexpected weak point and points to an off-nominal failure mode. The common dome separates the booster's propellant tanks and is one of the most structurally sensitive regions of Super Heavy. It contains complex curved geometry, large weld seams, and reinforcement transitions that can create stress concentrations if stiffness is not tuned correctly. The timing of the failure is the key clue. The structure didn't fail at peak load while fully cryo-filled and fully stressed. It failed during detanking when internal pressure was dropping. And for a thin-walled stainless steel tank, that pressure isn't just propellant containment, it's structural support. As pressure fell, the tank lost the stabilizing effect that normally stiffens the walls, resists ovalization, and boosts buckling margin. That vulnerability was amplified by the test setup itself. Test Tank 19 had several rings below the common dome left unpressurized, meaning part of the structure had less support than a normal, fully pressurized booster. So as detanking began, the common dome region would have lost stiffness faster, right when the tension rod system was still squeezing the stack. So the likely failure sequence is straightforward. The tension rod system kept applying strong compression. Detanking reduced internal pressure. Stiffness dropped, and the structure crossed a buckling limit around the common dome. Once that kind of buckle starts, loads shift suddenly. Cracks can spread along welds, and damage can grow quickly, even without a full collapse. And with thin-walled stainless steel tanks, even small weld or geometry imperfections can lower buckling margin and trigger failure earlier than expected. For Block 3 boosters, and Booster 19 specifically, this doesn't automatically mean the flight booster is unsafe. These tests exist to reveal weak links early. But SpaceX now has to determine whether this common dome failure mode could appear in real hardware under combined load states. That question matters because near max Q, flight footage suggests the liquid oxygen level can drop to roughly 2 rings below the common dome, meaning this region may not always be liquid-backed during the highest aerodynamic loading. Ullage pressure still provides stabilization in flight, so it's not identical to Test Tank 19's detanking case. But it does make the dome region a more realistic concern than it might first appear. If the anomaly was driven mainly by test sequencing or the test article configuration, the fix may be procedural, and Booster 19 could proceed toward cryo-proof testing with minimal change. But if the data points to a real structural margin deficiency in the Block 3 dome region, SpaceX may need reinforcement upgrades such as revised stiffener layouts, added local reinforcement rings, or dome structural adjustments. The key question now is whether Booster 19 rollout and proof testing will be paused to incorporate those changes, which would push Flight 12 back. Another major test campaign at Massey's involves Test Tank 18, which represents the aft section of the Block 3 Starship. It completed 3 structural tests in Round 1 in December, then received multiple upgrades based on test data before entering Round 2. It has already completed 4 tests in the current campaign, with more expected in the coming days. That data will feed directly into Block 3 Starship improvements. Test Tank 18 is using the new Block 3 ship cryo test stand, meaning Ship 39 cannot begin its own cryo-proof testing until Test Tank 18 completes testing and the stand becomes available. For now, Flight 12's timeline remains uncertain, with the Test Tank 19 failure and the ongoing Block 3 structural campaigns adding risk to an already tight test schedule. At Launch Pad 2, most of the major construction work is now wrapping up, and the pad is now approaching operational readiness. The orbital launch mount and launch tower are now largely complete, and the main construction crane has been moved across the road to the air separation unit site to support work there. That relocation is a strong sign that Pad 2's major heavy lifts are essentially finished, with the remaining work focused on final outfitting and commissioning. The chopstick arms were recently tested several times back-to-back to validate the newly installed larger hydraulic actuator. The arms now close faster than before, with noticeably reduced vibration and a cleaner stop. This improvement is consistent with a higher capacity actuator, providing smoother force control, allowing rapid arm motion during a tower catch, while minimizing oscillations that could otherwise amplify mechanical loads and trigger vibration-related failures. The ship quick disconnect arm was also tested for the first time since the installation of its extension section. More testing of both the SQD arm and chopsticks is expected in the coming days. The major test still pending at Pad 2 is the launch mount top deck water deluge system. Testing will begin once final mount work and checkouts are complete, followed by a full-scale deluge run to demonstrate the system's full thermal and acoustic suppression performance. Launch Pad 1 is now fully cleared, with debris from the old launch mount, the deluge plate, and the original concrete pad surface all removed. Teams have started drilling for foundation piling, which will provide the load-bearing support for new pad structures and reinforced zones in high-stress areas. As the rebuild progresses, excavation work for the upcoming flame trench is also expected to begin soon. In a separate update, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, has issued citations against SpaceX following a crane collapse at Starbase. The incident occurred on June 24th last year at Massey's, while teams were clearing debris from the Ship 36 test anomaly that happened 4 days earlier. The crane was being used to lift and remove large debris during cleanup operations, but it buckled under load. In its findings, OSHA says the crane had been repaired and returned to service without a qualified inspection to confirm the repair met manufacturer requirements, and that SpaceX also lacked a required qualified periodic crane inspection within the past 12 months. OSHA also flagged missing documentation for monthly wire rope inspections, rigging equipment without manufacturer markings for load limits, and a work setup where a suspended load was held while an engineer worked in the fall zone using an excavator bucket. Overall, OSHA listed 7 serious violations and proposed $150,850 in penalties. The case remains open, and SpaceX can contest the citations as the process moves forward. But the timing adds pressure as Starbase ramps up activity, with the FAA allowing up to 25 Starship launches from Texas in 2026. Now, let's discuss the latest updates from the world of science and technology. NASA's Space Launch System rocket for the Artemis II mission has officially completed its rollout to the launch pad, a major milestone toward the first crewed lunar mission in more than 50 years. Here's the rocket's full journey from assembly to the pad and what comes next. Stacking of the SLS began in the Vehicle Assembly Building about 18 months ago. First, NASA stacked the 2 solid rocket boosters on the mobile launcher. Next, the 65-meter-tall core stage, powered by 4 RS-25 engines, shipped from NASA's Michoud assembly facility to Kennedy, was lifted into position between the boosters and fully integrated. NASA then installed the interstage adapter, followed by the interim cryogenic propulsion stage, which serves as the rocket's upper stage. Finally, Orion and its launch escape system were mounted on top, completing the fully assembled 98-meter-tall stack. After stacking, teams performed extensive post-assembly checkouts, including system verifications, interface testing, and communications checks across vehicle components. In December, the Artemis II crew also completed a launch day countdown rehearsal, boarding Orion atop SLS for the first time to practice procedures and validate emergency egress protocols. With checkouts complete, the integrated vehicle rolled out from the assembly building to launch Complex 39B on January 17th. The 5 million kilogram stack, including SLS, Orion, and the mobile launcher, was transported by NASA's Crawler transporter over a 6.8-kilometer gravel route, taking about 12 hours at speeds up to 1 mile per hour. The SLS Orion vehicle is now secured on Pad 39B and connected to ground systems for final integration and pad checkouts. A wet dress rehearsal is planned for February 2nd, during which teams will load more than 700,000 gallons of cryogenic propellants, run the countdown to T-minus 29 seconds, then drain the vehicle with no engine ignition. If anomalies appear during the test, additional rehearsals or a rollback to the vehicle assembly building may be required. If all preparations proceed smoothly, Artemis II could launch no earlier than February 6th, carrying 4 astronauts: Commander Reed Wiseman, Pilot Victor Glover, Mission Specialist Christina Koch, and Mission Specialist Jeremy Hansen. The mission will fly a 10-day free return trajectory around the Moon, with a closest approach of about 10,300 kilometers on the far side, followed by a high-speed skip re-entry and splashdown in the Pacific Ocean off San Diego for recovery by a U.S. Navy vessel. There will be no lunar landing on Artemis II, as the primary objective is to validate Orion's life support, navigation, communications, deep space operations, and crew performance ahead of Artemis III, which aims for a lunar landing as early as mid-2027. Next week, I'm dropping a dedicated Artemis II deep breakdown, and trust me, it's going to change how you look at the entire mission. So make sure you're subscribed and notifications are turned on. And if you found this update useful, hit the like button, comment your take, and share it with your friends.